All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Pulse.
Deindustrialization was not.
Oh, there we go. Welcome back to the Pulse, where we discuss news stories and talk about the what's what in the here and now, so you guys can get that breakdown, get the real about what's going on in the world, and try to make sense of all this craziness. And so, I am your host, Evan Parker, joined by.
Tavius Jefferson.
All right, and today we got a hell of a show, man. It's a lot of stuff going on. I don't know, Tavius, how you feel about what's going on in the world right now, but I feel like it's getting crazier day by day. It's sometimes it's getting even hard to make sense of it for myself.
We did the last show, and this show I thought it was going to be super easy because State of the Union, I had my notes ready to go, and then a war broke out in the Middle East.
A whole war
Yeah,
broke out. So on today's show, excuse me, on today's show, the two main things that we're going to be discussing are one of the things that definitely flew underneath many people's radar, which is our Secretary of State. So for those of who don't know, our Secretary of State is a dude named Marco Rubio. And next to the president, he's basically the most powerful person in government, because the Secretary of State is the person who is responsible for our foreign policy and basically being the true face of the government, for all of the other governments across the world. So they influence foreign policy. They talk about basically they're just the main U.S. diplomat. So the first story that we're going to talk about is Marco Rubio giving a pretty damning and pretty monumental, to be quite honest, speech at this yearly conference that they have. There's this yearly conference called the Security Conference. Excuse me. It's the Munich Security Conference over in, was that, is this Germany? My geography is pretty bad. So yeah, the Munich Security Conference, where basically all the world leaders come together to discuss foreign policy, what their goals are, what their plans are, and things like that. And so Marco Rubio pretty much laid out a very violent, but also somewhat hidden and politically strategic plan of what the US government is intending to do and how they're intending to do it. And this is one of those stories where it's super important, but it's not going to get coverage because it's boring and it's crunchy. But thankfully, you have me here, and I'm going to be able to break it down. So, in my opinion, we are either witnessing, well, not either. I think we are witnessing the empire, the U.S. empire collapsing, and this is the plan that he lays out is the actions that are going to be the empire desperately trying to hold on to power as they are losing power. So, without further ado, what we're going to do is I'm going to play a couple of clips. And then after the clip, we'll kind of talk about what's going on, and I'll break it down, because what he's doing is he's playing the game of throwing stuff on the wall until something sticks. And it's very smart because, as you know, in this day and age of constant content, we just talked about how stuff was happening last week or 2 weeks ago, and then now a whole war broke out. So things are constantly always happening. People read headlines, people watch clips on TikTok, YouTube, whatever, and then they move on about their day. So what he does throughout his entire speech is he says a whole bunch of things that are just completely not true. 100% historically not true, are without fact and things like that, but they sound good, they sound convincing, and they're going to be extremely effective because people are going to share the clips or take the headlines and run on with it. So what we're going to do is play a series of clips. After each clip, I'm going to break it down a little bit, give some historical context to talk about what actually is going on, and then we'll discuss as we go. So this first clip, the theme for the entire speech that he's having is the U.S. and Europe need to join forces because the world is in disarray. And so Europe and the US need to join forces to basically bring the world back in order. And he's painting a very dire picture. He's basically saying, hey guys, the world is on fire. Oh, and by the way, he at this speech, he's speaking to a whole bunch of people that are like the Europe leaders and European leaders and things like that. So let's talk about this first clip where he's kind of like painting the picture of post World War II, and he's giving an idea as to what the mindset was, or what he's claiming the mindset was of Europe and of the United States right after World War II. So with that, we can play clip A and then we'll react to it.
But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion. that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals.
Okay, so he said a lot there, and I want to touch on a few main topics. For one, he touched on deindustrialization and the negative impacts of that on the global economy. And he also talked about, he was kind of alluding to the fact that, remember, this is post-World War II, so this is 1945. And he talked about how basically the United States and Europe, they just wanted the world to get along. All they wanted was the world to get along, and the world just couldn't do it. They had this vision where everybody's going to trade freely. We're going to love each other. And we have pushed democracy into the world. Now it's time for the world to just get along. That's the picture that he's painting, right? So let's talk a little bit about what exactly was really going on in the world post-World War II. The first thing, let's talk about Palestine. So let's put up visual aid A really quick on the screen. So at the time that all of this was going on, we're going to put the other aid up. There we go. So at the time, there was literally the first very big violent movement of Israel and the Zionist movement, which basically displaced and dispossessed over 700,000 Palestinian people from their land. And why is this important? Because at this time, the Zionist movement, which is the movement that believes that the Jewish people, have a right to the land that is Israel, aka right there in smack dab in the middle of Palestine. This movement was very widely supported and funded by both British and European interests as well as the United States. So at what point was Europe and the United States just wanting the whole world to get along? And at what point were they respecting, the boundaries or the sovereignty of other countries? They weren't. Right out of the gate, they're immediately trying to continue to expand and move on and move people out of their land. So there's violence right after World War II, and there's this lack of regard for people's nations right after World War II. So the fact that he's just saying that we just wanted the world to get along is just straight out not true. And this is just one of the many things that they were doing. And then another thing that he mentioned was the idea that people could just get along. We would have a nation without borders. Everybody would just kind of like be free to trade, while at the same time, they're literally imposing the border of Israel on the Palestinian people and being very vocal and supportive of that. And then also he talked about how people would be able to get rid of the idea of nationhood and just trade with one another and all these things. And so for that, let's put up the visual B really quick, because the idea that we would respect people's nations and just let people have the nations that they have while speaking to a whole bunch of European delegates is the irony. You can cut it with a butter knife, because most countries in the world, I believe it's like 80 to 85% of every single country in the world has been colonized by Europe. So it's just, to me, that's kind of laughable, thinking about how we're speaking of, we have a United States representative speaking to a whole bunch of people from Europe about respecting the boundaries of other nations is kind of just wild. So remember, all of this stuff is taking place right after World War II. So Tavius, I'm curious your thoughts about this. So when you hear somebody talking about, we just want the world to get along, what comes to your mind when you hear Rubio talking about that?
What comes to my mind is all of the evidence to the contrary. We have a long history, and we'll bite off a small chunk of that later and kind of digest it. But we have a long history of operating, setting one set of expectations of spreading democracy and spreading peace throughout the world, while actually doing the exact opposite of that. And and just taking advantage of nations, pitting nations against each other and profiteering off of the war machine. So I expect a lot more of the same, especially coming out of this administration. It's funny, this is kind of a graduation for Marco Rubio in a sense, because I remember during the first Trump campaign when he would call him Little Marco, and now it's like Little Marco's all grown up and he's, spreading American propaganda throughout the world. So
Facts.
I guess growth, I guess.
Right, exactly. He's getting better. I mean, I give him credit. He's definitely getting better at delivering the message. And to your point, the idea of saying one thing out of one side of your neck, and I mean that's the whole United States political game, by the way, everybody. So never for 1 second should you forget that the entire political and the entire government of the United States, their sole purpose is to advocate for and advance the desires of capitalism, of private interest, by any means necessary. And so, by any means necessary, that'll literally mean lying to you about what they're doing, and then going and destroying the world solely for the purpose of power and capital. And that's underscored by the fact, another quote that he had in there that I love. He said, countries systematically subsidizing their companies to undercut ours. And he was very, very diligent about saying that, or very, very key about saying that, because remember, again, post World War II, the entire world is destroyed. The entire world's manufacturing and everything like that is destroyed, except for the United States, because we were the only nation that didn't really have anybody, in our borders messing things up. But the entire world was destroyed. Everything was in disarray. There were a lot of nations that were disillusioned with colonization, and individuals were wanting to. This is when we had the rise of all the communist movements. We had the rise of all the socialist movements. Governments all across the world were like, you know what? We need to build up ourselves. We need to collectively share all of our stuff, because the world, the world has quite literally been destroyed. So we have all these nations coming up trying to, gather their resources, trying to build themselves up, trying to be self-sufficient, trying to be sovereign. However, by them doing that, it does what? It impacts the private capital of U.S. interests, and we can't have that. So a prime example of that is what I know Tavius is going to talk about this later, but right after World War II with Iran, so the World War II ended in 1945. Iran in 1953, they had Mossadegh, which was I can't remember what they call him, prime leader. I'm not sure. I forgot what
prime minister
of Iran. He basically said, "Hey, we have a whole bunch of oil over here. We need to nationalize our oil because we need to have control. We need to, be able to control our own destiny." United States said, "No, we're going to come in here and destroy all of this." And as you see, we're still battling this country today. And I'll let Tavius talk more about that later. But we can put visual C up on the screen really quick, just to kind of underscore that. So he's talking about the United States and the UK and Britain just wanting everybody to get along, while at the same time, this coup was funded by the United States and the United Kingdom. And the reason why they targeted them was because of oil. And I believe it's BP, British Petroleum, was one of the ones that ended up with control over the Iranian oil.
Yes.
By taking over the entire government. So I say all this to say, on one hand, he's just saying, look, guys, we just wanted everybody to get along. We just wanted to have democracy. We wanted everybody to have free trade. But that's quite literally the exact opposite of what they were doing. And it's genius, because nobody's going to really dig this deep, but that's what's going on. And then straight out of the gate, this is the very first 2 minutes of his speech. So straight out of the gate, he's on his knees right there for Europe, saying, please, Big Daddy Europe, I'm here for you. Let's team up together. And it's a very strong political play. So let's jump into the next clip. So in this next clip, what he's going to talk about is a bit about deindustrialization. and how it had such a negative impact on the United States, which he's not wrong about. But the part that he doesn't say is that the reason why we went through deindustrialization was because of people like Marco Rubio who were doing everything they could to allow corporations to move all of their plants overseas, take advantage of cheap labor, which of course took all the manufacturing out of the United States, took all of our strategic, plants and things like that out of the United States, put it somewhere else because it was cheap for company owners. That's the whole reason why it happened. It's not because it wasn't by some accident. It was cheap for company owners, so our government did everything they could to let these company owners do it. So with that, let's listen to how he frames this. We can play clip B really quick.
Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis.
And so the thing about that, I'm curious about your take on that. How, hearing him talk about deindustrialization and how it was just such a bad idea. What are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I think, like you said, it was people, him and people like him that led to the deindustrialization, that led to companies outsourcing for cheaper labor. And when we say cheaper labor, let's be clear, a lot of times the reason why the labor is cheaper is because they're violating basic human rights.
Facts.
It's not that we're getting, driven out or outbid by competition that has fair labor practices. This is going to people who are being exploited. And so there's exploitation on both ends, on the end of the American worker, as well as the workers who are on the receiving end of, whatever new business rolls into town and decides that they can pay them pennies on the dollar and work them to the bone. So not a great look. History remembers. I don't know why.
You would hope so. You would think so. I mean, history remembers, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
it seems like it doesn't even matter sometimes.
It does, and it's funny because there's a saying that history never repeats itself, but it rhymes. And this first segment rhymes. We're going bar for bar with the second segment, and just how this all ties back to the beginning of our relationships in the Middle East and what that's led to today.
1000%. And the other key thing to put here, again, you have to, whenever you hear these people speak, you have to keep in mind what their job is. Their job is to work for capital. Their job is to increase the means of private interest by any means necessary. There's very wealthy, powerful people, and they employ these politicians to do their bidding, if you will. So no matter what they say, you kind of have to think about what is the angle here? How is this helping capital? What does this look like? And they will point to any other issue other than what the actual problem is, which is centralized power by oligarchs who can influence foreign policy, hence by having Rubio out here advocating for foreign policy and laying out all of these issues. And we haven't even gotten to the most kind of like profound part of his speech, which he's going to lay out in a little bit. We're going to get to the next clip on that, but before we get there, I just want to also highlight, let's put up visual D really quick, because this one's fascinating. When I saw this and did the research on this, so we'll put that one right there. So I know it's a very busy graph, but you see a line up there. there's a line that has left. There's two lines actually that have left all the other lines in the dust. And essentially what this is it's tracking. We really started tracking this stuff, all of the metrics of wage growth, CEO pay, and corporate profit growth. It really started being tracked in the 1970s or so. And what you'll see here is that blue line at the bottom. Guess what? That's worker wage growth in real terms from 1970 to 2023 has only changed 15%. What are some of the other things that were taking place at this time? Continued coups, throwing over of governments, the communist scare. We're doing all of these things, the Cold War, we're doing all of these things to negatively influence and to restrict free trade. Meanwhile, CEO pay growth, as you see, is off the charts. So during all of this deindustrialization that Marco Rubio is talking so poorly about and saying, oh, it was such a mistake. Why did we do it? We should have never done it. But this is the reason why they did it, because the pay of these individuals skyrocketed through the roof. The profit margins of these companies, which is that green line, skyrocketed through the roof, over 1,800% since 1945. It's indexed since 1945, just going off the charts. And so, again, you have to ask yourself, this wasn't by accident. They knew this was going to happen. Like this is fully intentional, and they want it to keep happening by any means necessary. Like if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who has this much power, this much influence, this much money for this many decades, they're going to do anything and everything they can in order to maintain that power. So when you see charts like this, does it resonate with you? Like, are you surprised by seeing stuff like this, or what are your thoughts on that?
No. I'm definitely not surprised by that disparity at all. 15% over, what was that, 30 or 40 years? And
yeah,
well, that was CEO growth, the red line, right? And so they're up 1,000%.
Yep.
Good for them.
Right. bad for everybody else, man.
Just kind of underscores the inequality. That's the kind of again, it's the common thread through all of this is just the gross inequality.
100%. And so as we continue on, we have two more clips from Rubio that I want to talk through. And so this whole time, basically, he's laid out nothing but issues, right? He said, hey, all of these things have happened. We've been deindustrialized. It's been an issue. We just wanted the world to get along. It's not getting along. And now we are in a crappy place. Basically, the world is on fire. We need to figure out what we have to do. So what does he tout out as the solution? And here's really kind of like the bombshell. And this is, it's kind of crazy, because you thought that we had moved on past colonialism. Everybody in the world has kind of like agreed since the early 1900s that, yeah, going over and taking over somebody else's land and killing everybody and then renaming it something else is kind of not cool. We should probably not do that. And since then, we've stopped. But let's listen to what Marco Rubio touts out as the solution here. So with that, let's run clip C and then react to it.
Build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty.
Okay, so he said something very important there. He said, what we need to do is basically reestablish our markets. We need to get control over our supply chain, and we need to, basically control our own destiny, which I will give him a little bit of grace and say he's not wrong. However, he said something very important in there. He said they need to, and remember, he's speaking to a whole bunch of Europeans and he's speaking on behalf of the United States. He said that they need to work together to have a unified effort to compete and to capture market share in the markets of the global South. What have we been doing in the global South for quite a while? And what have we just recently done? We just recently literally kidnapped and captured the president of Venezuela, trying to destroy and throw their markets off, trying to throw their economy off in order for U.S. private interests to take control. So he's not talking about building what he said at the beginning of the speech of, we just want to have free trade. We want people to have control over their stuff. He's saying, you gonna give me that. I'm gonna come into your country and take it. And he's shielding it as just saying, we're going to compete for market share in the global South, AKA we're going to come in and, put a gun to your head and say, you're going to give me the oil and I'm taking your president out of here. So it's never been about collaboration. It's never been about shared interest, and it's never been about honesty. It's always been about force and control. And so this has been happening for over 100, 200 years. It's the same playbook repeating over and over. And like Tavius was saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And this is sounding like I was gonna date myself by saying some old rapper, but I'm gonna let that ride. I'm
Okay,
not,
please don't. They're gonna call you Unc in the
I'm gonna keep
comments.
that.
It's gonna
I'm
hurt.
gonna keep that.
It's gonna hurt.
Right. And so this last clip, I'm gonna play this last clip by him, and this is really the bombshell that he has. So let's run this last clip, clip D, and then talk about it.
For 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come.
So he said a lot there. A few key things. He said that the West was expanding up until 1945. By expanding, he means colonialism, going into countries and taking things over. Okay, so he said it was expanding up until 1945, which is true. And then it resulted in a world war. And then the whole world was like, yeah, maybe we should stop doing that because this is not cool. Right. And then but the framing, he paints it as an issue. He's like, listen, guys, we were expanding. We were doing our thing, and then we were stopped. Stopped by what? Stopped by the godless communist revolution, who were adamant about anti-colonialist or having anti-colonialist uprisings. He's painting people saying, please don't come over into my country and kill me and take over everything as a bad thing. And so the whole theme of what he's saying here is, listen, we kind of agreed to stop practicing colonialism in the 1940s, but hey, Europe, look at me in my eyes. We should bring it back. Partner up with me, and then we're going to bring back colonialism. We're going to take back over parts of the world because we had it all. We were growing, we were doing our thing, and then the godless communists came in and stopped us from, spreading democracy and spreading our lovely Christian values. That's another thing that he referenced a lot in the speech. I encourage you to watch the whole speech if you can. It's like 20 minutes. He talks a lot about Christian values and all this different type of stuff. So I'm curious your thoughts on the godless communist revolution and the anti-colonial uprising wordings that he used in that last clip.
So now I'm gonna date myself with a movie reference. Stop trying to make colonialism happen. It's not gonna happen, and it shouldn't happen. The heathen uprising. There's some argument as to which side was more heathenous than the other. We'll lay the facts out there and let you make the decision. I think it's laughable to use religion to invade countries that primarily practice what Roman Catholicism as far as South America is concerned. So I'm pretty sure they don't mind letting Jesus take the wheel down there either. I don't know why Marco Rubio feels like he needs to go in and spread his version of religion. The colonialism take blows me out of the water. The fact that he sits in a room full of European decision makers and uses that word, it was interesting to watch the power be on display and the lack of just you don't care anymore. The veil is off.
Yep, exactly.
You see what's happening at the seat of power, and it's fine. Everything's fine. Donald Trump kind of paved the way for that. This is the MO for his administration. We don't really have to do the behind closed doors handshake deals we'll do them in the Rose Garden on camera
On
for
camera.
everybody to see. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's kind of like the, like you said, the veil is lifted, and there's no more like what is it that's going on. They're saying flat out. So for anybody that is hearing this and understanding this and is privy to this, make no mistake, the United States government is not trying to reach good deals. They are not trying to have joint trade partnerships. They are on stage, on camera, blatantly saying, we want to bring back colonialism. And they're bragging about the fact that they have taken over industries in the global south and they want to continue to do more. And they're seeking partnership from Europe. And what's didn't play in the clips that we had is a room full of applause. Everybody was happy. It was very much unanimous agreement from the crowd. And so I'll close out before we transition into the next Iran segment, because I definitely want to get into that and hear about that. But I'll close out with kind of how I started, where what we're really witnessing here is the United States and all of the interests of the United States and then also Europe. They are at a place where it's now or never. Either we go out and take market share and kill people, start wars, and blow things up in order to hold on to our power, or our power is gone, because the world is shifting, the tide is shifting. You have this Chinese superpower who is not committing colonialism and is having a strong economic base, warranted by them building up their manufacturing over the past 50, 60, 70 years. And China's not going to be stopped. So the United States is like, we don't have anything to offer really other than war and force. So we're going to have to use everything we can to hold on to whatever power we can. And Marco Rubio just clearly laid out the plan for all of us to hear. And I really encourage you to watch the whole clip. And if you don't want to watch the clip, they even have on the security conference website a PDF document that's basically like a summary of everything that's going on. It's really well written. So I highly recommend you read that too. It's all free. They lay it out there. It's kind of mind blowing to have them write this stuff out. But anyway, check it out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Any closing words from you on this before we transition?
No, just you know, keep a watchful eye on what happens over the next few years, how conflicts continue to develop in Central and South America. And again, just keep in mind that this is all stuff that we've seen before and we know what the intended outcome is.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's a perfect transition, because a lot of what he laid out even goes into what's going on in Iran right now. So
Yes.
Tavius, let's hear it, because I know you've been doing some good research on the Iran stuff. Let's see what's going on there.
Yeah, so the the Iran thing, when it came up, when the strikes first happened, it very much led me down a rabbit hole of how did we get here? And there are things that I just didn't know, I wasn't aware of, how interconnected everything is and how long some of these players have been in the game. So I created a really quick rundown of how the United States got in bed with the Middle East, what we got out of it, what the result is, and basically how we get to this point where we're back in another conflict in the Middle East with possibly no end in sight. So hop in my time machine with me.
Let's do it.
We're gonna go back, but we're gonna do it very quickly, I promise. So 1901, British businessman goes to the Shah of Persia, pays him 50,000 pounds for the rights to explore oil. Uh, they drilled 7 years, didn't get anything. 1908, they hit oil. If you could put image one up. So they strike oil 1908. This is the beginning of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which would go on to become British Petroleum. So basically, Britain's got a fuel source and they have got a new economic driver in this oil. Of course, anytime a European power invests in another country, the deal is never going to be equal. This was the case with Iran, which was still called Persia at the time, they only got a small royalty. So who got paid from the oil? British engineers ran all the operations. British oil execs set all the oil prices. British shareholders collected the profits. The Iranians drilled the oil, and they lived in communities adjacent to the oil fields, basically the equivalent of housing projects, while some of probably the most valuable real estate in the planet was being built right next door to them off of the profit of their hard work. America is watching all of this at the time. This is pre-World War II.
They got to get their piece.
Right. And consider this is pre-World War II America. So not the nuclear superpower, but kind of the emerging superpower. So America in 1933, Standard Oil Company of California goes in, they strike a deal with Saudi Arabia. And so they form Aramco. Fast forward, World War II comes around, the American strategic interest in Iran, it changes. It's not just necessarily about the oil at this time. Now, the Allied forces also want to use Iran as a supply corridor for the Soviet Union. So now there's geological interest as well as the oil interest. So the Shah, and this was a young Shah who was installed by the British and Soviet forces. They removed his father for being pro-German. So they install a young Shah, Pahlavi. Iran's occupied by foreign powers, United States, Britain, and now they have a monarch who they installed in power.
Yep.
But that's where we are by the end of World War II. If we can get image 3 up, this is going to go back to what you were talking about earlier with Mossadegh.
Yep.
So after the war, Iran is furious, right? They feel like they've been getting the short end of the stick. So Prime Minister Mossadegh, basically constitutionally more Democrat, not necessarily radical, decides to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. So basically that means that this oil company is now for the Iranian people. And of course, Britain was not okay with that.
Right.
So what they decided to do is once they got put out, they imposed an economic embargo on Iran, and then they went to the United States and said, we need to do something about this. And the United States said, I got you, dog. So 1953, CIA and MI6, they launched an operation called Ajax. And basically American and British intelligence officers go into Iran. They're bribing military officers. They're paying street gangs to create chaos, and they're spreading disinformation through like newspapers and things like that.
Wow.
So in August of that year, Mossadegh gets overthrown. Right before that, Shah Pahlavi, the young guy who was installed by the Brits and the Soviets beforehand, he fled to Rome because there was a failed coup attempt. So he's thinking his time is done. Once Mossadegh gets overthrown, he returns to Tehran in Iran, and he gets restored to the throne by the Americans. So Iranians had a taste of democracy, and who comes in and snatches it away from them? America.
Yep, that's wild.
So
wow.
now we're starting to poke holes in that spreading democracy thing.
Right.
So the new oil consortium formed. 40% of the profits went to BP. The rest of it was split between American oil companies. Everybody got rich. The Iranian people, again, were pissed, and they remembered who was to blame for it. So that's just to stop right here. Democratically elected leader gets removed because the Western powers didn't like what he did with his own country's resources. So I kind of want to get your reaction to that. And I want to kind of get your reaction to if Mossadegh had been allowed to stay in power and nationalize the Iranian oil, what, like, first of all, do you think that changes anything? And if so, how do you think that changes things?
Got you. So my reaction to it is, again, it's those things where it's more of the same. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, because at that exact same time, in that same time frame, the United States is and Britain and UK is doing that all across the world. When you think about the Cuban Revolution, when you think about the USSR and how the Cold War and attacking the communist movements and things like that, it's everything that threatens capital, everything that threatens private interests. The United States is there to squash it, and then not only squash it, but hold up a flag and say, see, this type of economic arrangement doesn't work. It can't work. You have to support capitalism, because when you try communism, look what happens. Your industries get all messed up. So I'm not surprised. And then to the point of how would things have changed if Mossadegh was able to stay in power, it only would be speculation, but I would say if he were able to stay in power without any type of foreign interference and
Mhm.
able to run his oil the way that it makes sense for him and the country and things like that, I think we would be living in a completely different 2026. Because if he were able to do that, then maybe Russia would have been able to, maybe China would have been able to do what they've done now sooner without the interference. The Cuban Revolution, the Venezuelan Revolution, there's a lot of the African revolutions that was going on at that time where everybody was trying to embrace communism. I think the entire world would be in a different place than it is right now, instead of this run of 80, 90 years of failed capitalism where the wealth of the world is continuously going to the top 1%. And maybe we would live in a more equitable spot now if things like this were able to continue.
That's a valid point, and you bring up the Cold War. I kind of want to get into that, and also talk a little bit about how that wealth started to shift, especially when we talk about these oil companies that are ran by Western interests in the Middle East. So Mossadegh is gone. The Shah is one of the most important Cold War partners to America.
Mm.
The oil revenues throughout the 60s and 70s are booming. But again, not everybody is feeling the love from that. You've got the few at the top, you've got the Shah, his court, the military interests, the Western business interests, all of them got money. The defense corporations, all the ones you know and love, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, they all moved in, built up, big contracts for the supply chain,
To
for
produce all
defense.
the bombs and stuff.
Well, expanding the Shah's military, not just the
Oh,
United States military, but also just expanding, helping set up supply chain, things like that. So you also had within the Iranian military, the generals, the ministers within the government, all getting rich. They're getting commissions. They're getting kickbacks. In 1971, actually, if you could put number 5 up for me. 1971, the Shah throws a party at Persepolis. So this party is supposed to be commemorating the 2,500 years of the Persian monarchy. It cost over $200 million at the time. And I'm sorry, if you could also jump back to number 4. It cost over $200 million at the time. That's over $500 million by today's standards. So he
wow.
spent $500 million while people are literally just starving in his country to throw this grand party.
Wow.
Um, it's starting to rhyme, right? It's
Yeah,
starting to rhyme.
exactly.
So to protect the arrangement, because obviously you throw a $200 million party in the middle of the desert, you're going to piss some poor people off. The Shah's government built what was called Savak. Now, this is a secret police trained and advised by CIA and guest star Israel's Mossad. Basically, they any type of political opposition to the Shah, they monitored, arrested, tortured, killed people all across the spectrum. So,
What does that sound like to you? That sounds like something familiar to me. What we're seeing
oh
in the
man, I
streets
could
today.
listen. You could shake up a box with letters and pull out any 3 letters, and it sounds like an organization that has done something very similar.
Yep.
So by the late 70s, the contradictions were very, very unsustainable. 1979, the Shah left Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini, who had been exiled during this time, he comes back. This is a very important distinction. This is Ayatollah Khomeini with an O, not Ayatollah Khomeini with an A, who was a lieutenant under the original Ayatollah Khomeini, who I'm talking about now. But that is who was just killed in Iran this past week. So,
What the lieutenant was killed?
The lieutenant who became the leader of Iran after the OG Ayatollah Khomeini with an O passed away. So,
Gotcha.
so Ayatollah Khomeini, OG Khomeini, returns from exile. The American embassy gets seized. 52 diplomats get held hostage for over a year. And basically, that's the end of the bromance between Iran and the United States. So stopping right there, once the Shah falls, America's Middle East strategy, it's gone out the window. Washington scrambling for new partners. So, question for you. U.S. knowingly backed the government that was torturing its own citizens with the Savak. At what point does the strategic interest stop justifying that type of partnership? Because we know we have that type of partnership going on right now with other countries. We know
as soon as the money stops. As soon as the money stops, we cannot stand for these atrocities. We must do something to intervene. We can't have it.
It's like we've seen this playbook before. And when I was putting all of this together, just piece by piece, decade by decade, I'm like, this makes so much sense.
It's the same playbook. It literally is the same playbook, and it's kind of funny, but not funny. I mean, everything is very tragic, but they're literally running the same play. They're the equivalent of the Atlanta Falcons hitting the field, and then running jet right sweep for 120 years straight. And getting touchdown after touchdown, and everybody's like, "Well, what play are they going to run next? Probably jet right sweep." they're going right there to the right side until somebody says something.
It reminds me of just like 07, 08 Madden with Adrian Peterson. You just hand the ball off to him, miss touchdown every time.
Straight up the field, every time.
All right. So, do you want to talk about the new friends that we made in the Middle East?
Let's talk about it.
Okay. So, of course, Washington not happy with the way things ended with Iran. The Carter Doctrine goes into effect, and basically what the Carter Doctrine says is the Persian Gulf is vital to American interests and worth defending by military force. Very important phrasing. So America needed new partners in the Middle East, and the two new partners that we found were Saudi Arabia and Iraq. The two best friends that anyone could have.
Oh my goodness. Yep.
So in Saudi Arabia, basically
placed right next to Iran, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Trying to get control of that oil.
Exactly. So the U.S. Army sent the Army Corps of Engineers in Saudi Arabia, and they started building huge military complexes all throughout the 1980s. So the King Khalid military city alone cost $8 billion to build at that time. Just to put in perspective, like how big of a military presence we were putting there. American defense corporations trained Saudi forces. They sold weapons. They collected billions of dollars in contracts because, Lockheed's got to get theirs.
Yeah.
Of course, the Saudi royal family, the princes, all the officials around them, they got rich with all these deals. So it was basically the same model as Iran. We're just running the same playback, jet sweep right in Saudi Arabia.
So you said they built a $8 billion $8 billion base.
And that was one of their bases they built. Yes.
Oh,
the
wow.
King Khalid military city.
Wow.
It cost $8 billion to build, and it was one of multiple military complexes that they built in Saudi Arabia throughout the 80s. Actually, to go back a little bit, what was funny about some of those Iranian bases were, I believe a lot of them, the contracts for them went to Osama bin Laden's father, who owned the construction company.
Wow.
Yes, that is where he got his knowledge of buildings and explosives, probably. So, going back to Saudi Arabia, everything's going fine there. All out war breaks out in Iran and Iraq in 1980. The United States, being, the shady character that it is, decides to tilt towards Saddam Hussein in the war between Iran and Iraq. So we're starting to back Iraq. American intelligence was shared with Iraqi commanders. American companies, with government approval, exported weapons and technology to Saddam Hussein. When Saddam Hussein in 1988 used chemical weapons against Kurdish civilians, he actually killed thousands of people. If you could put image number 8 up, I hope I'm pronouncing the city right. Halabja, 1988, unleashed a gas attack, killed thousands of people. Washington, D.C. condemned it, but in private, still continued the relationship with Saddam Hussein.
So, and this was Saddam Hussein unleashing the attack on his own people. Is that correct?
That was him unleashing that attack on a Kurdish group of in a Kurdish city. So,
wow.
yes, Saddam was a very interesting actor in that area at the time, and he had also built up the 4th largest military. So he wasn't really a joke in the area. There's a situation that we'll get to with Kuwait in just a second that kind of shifted relationships with the United States as well. But here's where things get really outrageous, especially going back to what Marco Rubio was saying about colonialism. This is how no one benefits. So the very same time that Washington was backing Saddam in Iran, in Iraq, it was secretly selling weapons to Iran in the 80s. Sound familiar?
Right.
Iran-Contra.
Yep.
So Iran-Contra, which, kind of publicly came out in 1986, basically said senior officials in the Reagan administration were covertly selling arms to the Islamic Republic, and the government, America, publicly called it state-sponsored terrorism. They were basically just selling weapons too. They were taking the money from that weapon and funding the Contras, who are a rebel group in Nicaragua. And that was to bypass a congressional ban on selling weapons. So basically, the United States was arming both sides of this conflict. We don't have to get into the CIA and Iran-Contra. Everybody knows the background there and the ramifications there and what that meant back here in the United States. But we're supposed to be fighting communism in Central America. That was the justification. But we know the toll that it took, and we know that it wasn't worth it. So that's kind of how America played the Middle East in that situation, selling weapons to both sides. A lot of bodies piled up. American interests made a lot of money in the meantime, not to mention the money they were still getting from the oil.
Yep.
So in Afghanistan, CIA's Operation Cyclone put billions of dollars into the Mujahideen fighting force. So that was the Soviet fighting force. It was a covert program, and what it was designed to do was to bleed the Soviets, but it distributed weapons and training across a network of fighters whose loyalties remained the loyalties would shift. So basically, you're selling weapons to a group today who may or may not be supporting you. Among those groups, there were volunteers who joined the Afghan Jihad. One of them was the rich son of a construction mogul named Osama bin Laden, who in 1989 went back home after having basically defeated and pushed back the Soviet forces. So you've got a young, rich Osama bin Laden who's got seasoned fighting experience with the Mujahideen, in pushing back one of the great nuclear powers at the time. So that's where Osama bin Laden's ego comes into play. Just to give you an idea of why he thought he was so capable, that's kind of the start of his villain origin story. What happens next, though, and we'll get into that in a second, is kind of what made Osama bin Laden and America at odds, and the reason why America was number one on his target list up until 9/11. So, but just to backtrack, at the end of the 80s, America armed Saddam, they armed the Afghan Mujahideen, they enriched another Gulf area elite class in the Saudis, and then we've got Osama bin Laden coming home. So all of these pieces are being put on the chessboard and being set up for what happens throughout the 2000s and in our lifetime. So we've basically kind of caught up to our lifetimes going back from 1901.
And all of this is to basically destabilize that region in order to have control over the oil. Is that what you're getting at?
So the crazy thing about it all, and spoiler alert, it looks like a well-coordinated multi-generational plan to destabilize a region, when in actuality what it was profiteering and a series of decisions that just had domino effects down the line decades later. So was the destabilization in the Middle East intentional? Probably not. The profiteering was. Some of the destabilization definitely was. The coups were. The withdrawing of democracy from the Iranian people, that definitely was, a part of the plan. But the overall picture that's painted, it was just a series of decisions made out of greed, honestly. And I guess question for you, even after the attack in Halabja, the gas attack, the United States still supported Saddam Hussein. 2003, we invaded, we're going after Saddam Hussein. Does it change how you think about the way we went into Iraq post 9/11? And I guess that would be my question for anybody to think about, knowing what you know now, if you've followed the journey that I've taken you through up to this point, does it change how you feel about the way we went into Iraq in 2003?
From the standpoint of knowing what it is that he had done and the fact that, like, invading to try to take him out, is that where you're coming from?
Well, not only what he had done, but also the complacency of the United States and the support of the United States in what he had done and others in the region.
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? Does it change your thoughts on how we invaded?
It definitely, it's eye-opening, because at the time, and I mean, this is coming through the filter of, like, I think I was in middle school when this happened. So, like, it definitely felt like, from the American propaganda point of view, we were going to get the bad guy. Going through the history now, it's, hey, we knew the bad guy was the bad guy all along, and we helped the bad guy out. And now that the bad guy isn't helping us, we're gonna go get the bad guy. It does make me think about things differently, especially having grown up in that time and coming out of high school right when the surge in Iraq was happening. So seeing a lot of friends go into the military and immediately get shipped out after basic to the Middle East, it does impact the way that I think about those things.
Yeah, it's all for the to continue the United States empire, the imperialism, the capitalism, and, like, the covert things that are going on. There's always some other reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are just about done. We're rolling through. We've come from 1901. We are now at 1990. So we are making great time on our tour through the history of the Middle East. But I do want to talk a little bit about Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait. We mentioned that a little bit earlier in the segment, and basically how the Saudis had to make a choice, and that choice is what set the scene for today. Spoiler alert, Dick Cheney's got something to do with this.
Dick Cheney's always got something to do with it.
He does. He's just the worst. So by 1990, the Iran-Iraq war pretty much was all but over. Iraq had about $80 billion in debt. $14 billion of that debt was owed to just Kuwait. So Saddam Hussein owed Kuwait $14 billion. He said, hey, I need debt relief. They said, hey, not happening.
Nah, they said, run me my money.
So Kuwait was also, and this is allegedly, doing what was called slant drilling into the oil fields in Iraq. So usually you would drill straight down, but if this is the property line for Iraq, they were drilling this way into, underneath Iraqi soil and extracting oil that way. Kuwait often exceeded its OPEC quotas during this time, so that kind of backs up the claim. Let's see. And they also kept the oil prices low when Iraq needed the revenue. So not only were they slant drilling into Iraq, supposedly stealing Iraqi oil, but they were also exceeding their quota with OPEC to keep their oil prices low so that Iraq couldn't make any money to pay them back. It was very, very much a middle finger to Saddam Hussein. So the Saudi royal family, seeing all of this, basically to back up, Saddam got pissed August 2nd, 1990. They sent tanks in. And actually, I think we have, if you could put number 10 up, we have an image of the Iraqi tanks basically just coming into Kuwait. So imagine turning down Peachtree and seeing 6 tanks just rolling your way. Not a fun way to start the week. So basically the Iraqi tanks crossed the border into Kuwait, and Saddam declared that Kuwait is going to become Iraq's 19th province.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you don't want to you forgive the debt, I'll just take your country. Now there's no debt. The Saudi royal family were panicked because Saddam, again, 4th largest army, he's now at the border. So they are feeling backed into a corner. Who steps forward and offers help? Osama bin Laden. Again, big ego coming off the back of that win against the Soviets. So he proposed, hey, let the Afghan veterans fight Saddam Hussein's army. And the Saudi royal family basically said, no, that's insane. The only reason you beat the Soviets is because you hid in caves and Saddam Hussein has missiles. So no, we're not going to go with you. We actually know somebody else. We're going to call somebody else. So instead of going with Saddam Hussein, King Fahd called Washington, and the Secretary of Defense at the time, Dick Cheney, flew into Riyadh. He had satellite imagery of the Iraqi forces, basically saying, hey, these guys are already at your border. And then the Saudi royal family said, we need your help. Dick Cheney said, say less. We sent in 500,000 American troops to Saudi Arabia. That was January 17th, 1991, Operation Desert Storm.
Wow. You giving me a whole history lesson right now.
I'm telling you. So if you can put up number 12, Desert Storm was 100 hours of ground combat. Saddam's army got pushed back. They liberated Kuwait. And then President Bush stopped. And this is pivotal because if you remember, the first President Bush was a one-term president. He only served 4 years. And a big part of the criticism for him at the time was that he did not go forward with killing Saddam Hussein. So President Bush stopped leaving Saddam in power. So basically, the justification was that for that at the time was removing Saddam Hussein would destabilize the region. Now all of a sudden we're concerned with destabilizing
Right.
the region.
After 50 years of trying to do it.
So the American forces, of course, they never left Saudi Arabia. They established permanent bases. Tens of thousands of troops stayed. Bin Laden, on the other hand, pissed off about this. Number one, he was not happy with his father's work on constructing the American bases. Again,
In
to
Saudi
him,
Arabia, right?
we are infidels. So when the oil execs first came in and they were living on those bases in Iran, they were doing some outlandish things like letting women drive and just bringing all of their American sensibilities there.
Yeah.
Again, we're the infidels, we're the American devils. In Osama bin Laden's mind, we should have never been let in. So once America gets chosen over Osama bin Laden to defend the Saudis against Saddam Hussein, that really puts a thorn in his side. And once that's over and we never leave and tens of thousands of troops remain, bin Laden starts expressing his outrage. And as a result of that, he gets his passport revoked and he gets expelled out of Saudi Arabia in 1992. So in 1996, his first formal declaration of war against the United States, he starts targeting U.S. citizens and U.S. bases in the region. Basically, anything within reach, he's attacking it. Kind of how Iran is responding right now to the attacks from the United States. They're not trying to launch an attack on U.S. soil. They're saying anything that we can do in the region to disrupt the United States, we're going to do it. So this led to embassy bombings in Kenya, Tanzania, killed 224 people. In 2000, there was an attack on the USS Cole, ultimately culminating in allegedly his attacks on September 11th.
On 9/11, yeah.
Now, again, that whole thing being disputed, but basically that is the culmination of it. But the 9/11 attacks are important because they do lead into the final segment, which is the invasion of Iraq and the aftermath of all of that. But before we get into that, I want to go back and I want to get your opinion, because the Saudis they came to a fork in the road. Bin Laden or Dick Cheney. Literally between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
Talking about the lesser of two evils. So they chose America. Bin Laden's not going to forgive it. We know everything that followed that. Just to sit with that for a moment, if the Saudis would have somehow said yes to bin Laden and kept the American troops off of the Saudi soil, does that prevent all of those attacks? Does that prevent Tanzania? Does that prevent all of the other bombings? Does that prevent 9/11? Or do you think that that's an inevitability?
No, I definitely think that it would prevent it, because I think, I mean, there's don't get me wrong, there's a lot of hatred to be had and disapproval to be had for American politics by many people in the region. But I think that there was a tipping point, and the tipping point is, if there's things that you've done in the past and occupations that you've done in the past that I read about or that impacted my father, my grandfather, that I don't like, that's one thing. But if now you're in my face and you're right around, troops are driving around, like you mentioned, you're bringing your way of life here, and it's like, I have to deal with this, I have to deal with the impacts of this, however you might feel if it's warranted or not, in the eyes, in his mind, or in a lot of individuals' minds, they were like, getting fed up. So it's not only is there a history of meddling in my region, but now you're here. And you're and now what I'm saying, I can't escape you, and now the anger is just festering, and it's kind of like, something has to be done. How could a man can only take so much? So I definitely think that if the United States were have not to have been in there, things would have been things would have transpired differently. But I also don't know that the Afghani troops would have been able to properly, defend Saudi Arabia against the, to your point, fourth largest army at that time with missiles and all other type of stuff. So
and one willing to use chemical weapons on civilians. It
exactly.
probably would have been a different story in the Middle East. So Bush 1 chose to leave Saddam in power after liberating Kuwait. Bush 2, 12 years later, goes back, kills Saddam. But we know the cost of that. Looking back, which decision do you think is now or will be in the future judged more harshly? Bush 1's decision to leave Saddam in power in Kuwait, or Bush 2's decision to send in troops, go door to door, ultimately find Saddam, no matter the cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a tough one. I would say that in hindsight, it seems like, if you had the chance to do it the first time, if you're going to be in this region and there's already a war and you already have 500,000 troops, finish the job, so to speak. But who's to say what type of destabilization or whatever would have happened after that? I mean, it's hard to say. It would be a tough one, man. I don't know. I do think though that Bush 2's decisions are just, in hindsight, all bad. I mean, we know that there's just a whole bunch of poorly made decisions that was gone there with all different types of invasions and reasons why he was doing what he was doing. Maybe taking Saddam out wasn't one of those reasons, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm torn between the two. I can see it going both ways.
Yeah, I definitely think the argument could be made that there were things that could have been avoided had we taken Saddam out. You had all of the support. You had a guy who was using chemical weapons on people, torturing people.
Yeah, momentum's on your side on that one.
Yeah, his neighbors in the Middle East were not a fan of him.
Yeah.
Like you said, you already have 500,000 troops there. The fact that you showed restraint at that moment, I can understand the decision. I can understand not wanting to be responsible for the destabilization, but again, I can't imagine that George H.W. Bush, a man who worked, I believe, at the CIA, had the history, bro. You know that we've destabilized the region even when we didn't try to destabilize the region.
Yeah,
So,
I don't buy the fact that they didn't want to destabilize as some reason. Like I don't believe that they cared about that at all.
at all. So speaking of Saddam Hussein and destabilization, let's wrap it up with starting with the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So if we could put item number 13 up. So 2003, with claims about weapons of mass destruction. Oh, I'm sorry, item 13. With claims about weapons of mass destruction that ultimately proved to be false. The United States went in, toppled Saddam, dismantled the Iraqi state. The army was disbanded. That disbanding the army had a ripple effect throughout the region, because what that did was it sent hundreds of thousands of armed and now unemployed Sunni men into the streets. So what happened after that was basically civil war on kind of a sectarian level, and a Sunni insurgency that basically evolved into Al-Qaeda in Iraq, that basically mutated into ISIS. So that whole thing destabilizing Iraq, this was Bush's worst fear, but the inevitable still happened. It just got pushed back 12 years. Destabilized the region, sent the Sunni men into the streets, sectarian civil war. You'll remember the old news reports of the Sunnis and the Shias fighting. Al-Qaeda forms in Iraq. push back Al Qaeda. ISIS forms as a result of that. At its peak, it controlled about as much landmass as the United Kingdom in the Middle East.
Oh wow, what
So
ISIS did?
yes,
Oh wow.
so no small feat. They were very large, and you can imagine never fully eradicated, right? Even though the United States spent over $2 trillion and hundreds of thousands of lives between American soldiers and Iraqis.
Do you feel like they are justified in their formation?
Um, Justification is a weird word in this situation because if you look at it at an individual level, if I was fighting for an army for a nation that I believed in and it got toppled and then I got sent out into the streets and now I'm just fighting with my brothers in arms against a perceived enemy, not even a perceived enemy. The United States is very much a documented enemy at this point. I mean, it you can kind of understand the chain of radicalization there. I
Yeah.
mean, you see your homeland get blown up, you try to fight back and do the right thing, the army gets disbanded, you're wandering around without a sense of purpose. It's very easy to kind of fall into these types of organizations. Um, and these types of organizations also feed on recruiting those types of individuals. So it's just a very dark synergy that occurs when these types of things happen. So turning from Iraq to Afghanistan, 20 years of effort spent there, 2 trillion more dollars. And now we can put that 13 back up. Basically 2021. Okay, we have 13 now. That's actually Desert Storm. Okay, thank you. So 2021, we pull out of Afghanistan. This is just a picture from inside of one of the planes. And you can remember at the time, Evan, the footage of the withdrawal from Afghanistan from an optics level, it was just terrible. There
It
were
was
people
bad.
literally hanging on to the wings of the airplanes, falling off midair, trying to escape what they knew was coming within days of the withdrawal by American troops
Complete
and the
and
Biden
utter destruction.
administration. The Taliban had completely taken over
Yep.
Afghanistan again. This time with a lot more tanks and a lot more equipment that the United States just kind of left there. So running beneath all the military history is an economic history. All of that oil wealth in the Persian Gulf, um, it bought loyalty, but it didn't buy accountability. It created an extraordinary amount of inequality. It did so much to destabilize the region that America really. I don't think there's a way to account or atone for exactly every decision that was made um, over the last 100 years in the Middle East, but at the very least, people like Marco Rubio could learn from it. They could look at what we did, what happened in 1953 when we stole a democracy, when we backed the Shah who repressed people, like when we had to pivot from Iran to Saudi Arabia to Iraq. Like, we know how this is going to go. We know how it's going to end. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost, trillions of dollars spent, and the only people who are going to benefit from it are a part of the ruling class.
And I think that's exactly what Marco Rubio has learned from it. He knows
Yeah.
the money that's to be had. I mean, shareholder value, the line must go up. Let's get those defense contracts in. Let's get those AI contracts in. Let's get those, data centers. Let's get the control over that oil. I mean, it's like I said, it's just driving that line up by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so yeah, people like Marco Rubio and those ilk, they've definitely learned from it. They just learned something different than what some others may learn from it. They just learned what's possible, and they just see the power. I mean, it's something that I feel like I'm starting to come to terms with, and it's a weird thing to think about, but a lot of us tend to think that most people in the world are operating on good faith, but what I'm beginning to discover, and I mean, it sounds crazy to say because it's like, almost seems obvious, but there are really some, messed up people that are in charge, in power, and people will do all manner of messed up things just to have power or to say that they can. Or like some of these people are just fucking crazy. They're just flat out crazy.
Yeah.
They're just flat out crazy people, and they are charismatic and they have power, and they're going to just destroy shit. Honestly, I mean, there's no really other way to put it. Like sometimes the reason why they do certain things is just destructive, and it's pretty insane. It's kind of hard to wrap my mind around, but I'm beginning to wrap my mind around it more when we see things taking place within these administrations, because you think about, what is the end goal here? I mean, are you literally going to blow up the planet just to say that you have a couple more billions of dollars? And the answer to that is yes, they will.
I mean, again, just to go back briefly, at one point they were selling weapons and ignoring chemical attacks from Iraq, selling weapons illegally to Iran, funneling those profits to Nicaragua, while funneling crack to African Americans. This was all one play.
At the same. It's all one play.
That's Jet Suite, right?
Yeah,
that's one play. So yeah, it's very cold calculations that are going on behind the scenes.
And so how does all of this bring us to where we're at now? Because now we're back in the Middle East. No boots on the ground, no troops. But where does that bring us to with Iran?
Yeah, and the no boots on the ground thing, that line from the administration really bothers me, because it's 2026. You don't need boots on the ground to call it an invasion. Okay,
Facts.
You can send in unmanned aerial vehicles. You can send in missile strikes. You can do things like that, and to the people on the ground who are ducking missiles, it's an invasion.
Absolutely.
So, the no boots on the ground thing is kind of like, well, it's a technicality, but it doesn't really matter at this point, because you're still achieving the thing that you want to achieve.
Facts.
And that pretty much rounds out the trip through time, basically, to the Middle East and where we are with the current standings and the situation that's going on in Iran. I expect more of the same. New leaders installed, new backdoor handshake deals, new billionaires, new defense contracts, new lives being lost because someone needs to get wealthy.
Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. That was a hell of a history lesson. I hope people play that back, take notes on that one, because there was a lot of detail in there, and I think it's really lost on people, especially Americans, the fact that there are there's bombs being dropped right now as we speak. Being dropped, killing men, women, children, families, civilians, military, you name it. Right now, people are like, and when we hear that, it's people are literally being vaporized. These bombs are extreme. Like, it's the bomb drops and it's over with, and this is happening right now. And I think it's the imagery of that, or the idea of that. I think it's so imaginary to some people, because we see the headline of, oh, there's war, oh, there's bombs dropping, and it's like, when you really sit with and contend with what that means and the destruction that's involved in something like this, it's mind-blowing. It's barbaric. It's very unfortunate, and I think that people are so disconnected from it that they don't really realize the severity of it. And then when we talk about, the theme of capitalism, communism, what your tax dollars are being used for, group economics and things like that, our tax dollars are being used to do all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get goddamn healthcare to save my life without having to pay however many hundreds and thousands of dollars to healthcare premiums and all this different type of stuff. And my tax dollars can't be used for whatever. But good thing to know that it's going to bomb kids in Iran, so somebody can have a couple more $1 billion in their oil portfolio. And it's just a shame. It's a shame. And I mean, I get frustrated about it, thinking about it. Don't get me started on healthcare. I could talk about healthcare until, the end of the year. But yeah, it's just
I have to do that one day.
we'll have a marathon. We're going to do a mafia-thon with healthcare on Twitch. But no, I mean, yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. So that kind of brings us full circle to where we're at with this show. And play this back again, take notes. And if you haven't already, again, check out the Security Council speech by Rubio, the whole thing. It's about 20 minutes, but it's just full. It's honestly a masterclass at political illusion, because he's lying the entire video about every single historical contextual reference that he makes is a lie, or either outright lie or a lie by omission. And they laid out the strategy. There's not going to be any collaboration. It's going to be more war, more violence, more of our tax dollars going towards killing people. And I mean, I'm not okay with it. Any closing words from you, Tavius, before we log off?
Little Marco, all grown up, out
Little
here
Marco.
lying to the people.
Little Marco, all grown up, man. Damn. What if he would have got picked that one day whenever they were playing pickup ball, and then they would say, "No, I don't want him on my team." And then he was like, "I'm going to go to the debate club." And now here we go. 55 years later, Marco Rubio's on stage. Should have picked up. Moral of the story: if you see that little kid on the basketball court and he ain't really hoop with nobody all day, pick him up, put him on your team, because he's going to turn into Marco Rubio in 40 years if you don't.
I am pretty sure. Yeah. Back in 2015, he accidentally hit a kid in the face with a football. I just had to fact check that.
Did he really?
Yeah. So the athletic acumen is not
It's
there, and there's documented evidence of that. People, do your research. But yeah.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Well, without anything else, signing off. We will see you guys on the next one. Every second Wednesday. I mean, the first and third Wednesday of the month, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Bringing you the news, bringing you the stories, bringing you the breakdowns. And with that, see you on the next one.
See ya.
See ya.